Good afternoon, boys and girls. My name is Miss Melissa, and I will be your host for today. This is Miss Amy Baker, your teacher. Today, we will learn all about fairy tales and how to distinguish fantasy from realistic fiction. Are you ready to get started?
Today's lesson is titled Beauty and the Beast, Part 1. I cannot wait to see who the magical character might be and what magical powers we'll discover. By the end of today's lesson, we will learn about the characters, plot, and setting of Beauty and the Beast. We will identify common characteristics of fairy tales, such as once upon a time, beginnings, royal characters, magical events, and happy endings. We'll also identify the fairy tale elements in Beauty and the Beast and describe illustrations that we see throughout the story. We know that fairy tales are stories that feature members of a royal family, such as a king or a queen or an emperor. Sometimes there's a prince or a princess. These characters have special powers or magic. Many things that happen in fairy tales are fantasy and cannot happen in real life. In other words, fairy tales are fiction. Raise your hand if you enjoy listening to fairy tales.
Lots of hands went up, didn't they? Lots of hands.
Can you recall a fairy tale that begins with once upon a time or long, long ago? Think about the kinds of endings that fairy tales usually have. Are they happy or are they sad? Can you name any fairy tales in which the characters have magical powers? Over the next several days, we will share some of our favorite fairy tales. And this one is one of my favorites.
Mine too.
Today, we are going to hear a fairy tale called The Beauty and the Beast. This story was written by a French woman, Madame Villeneuve. She lived in France. On the globe, I will show you where we live. In the bottom of the United States in Mississippi. If we traveled all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to Europe, we would find where Madame Villeneuve lived in France. This Read Aloud is a classic fairy tale. Like all fairy tales, it has once upon a time in the beginning, a royal character, magic, and a happy ending. Boys and girls, thumbs up if you've ever seen a chart like this. Miss Melissa, do your magic. K means what we want to know. W means what we want to know. K means what we know. Sorry, boys and girls. And L means what we have learned. Let's talk about what we already know, Miss Melissa. Would you help me?
Yes, we know that fairy tales are make-believe. You also told us that fairy tales can have characters such as a king, queens, prince, princesses, sometimes emperors. And we also know that fairy tales can begin with once upon a time, once, or even long ago.
Right. Now, what would we like to know, or what do we want to know?
I just heard a student say that they would like to know what life lesson is a fairy tale going to teach, or does it teach a lesson? Oh, I heard another one say, will there be magic characters in the story? Awesome job, boys and girls.
At the end of the story, we'll come back and fill in the chart with what we learned. Before we read, let's begin by first discussing some important vocabulary words that you'll hear in the story. Let's take a look at them. Our first word is merchant.
Merchant.
Say merchant with me. Ready?
Merchant.
A merchant is someone who buys and sells goods. I wonder what a merchant might look like.
Great job. Great gestures. Awesome. Those are good.
In this story, you will meet a merchant and his 3 daughters. The sentence that uses the word merchant might be something like this. The merchant went to a faraway land to find new and interesting things to sell. What do you think the merchant in this story sells? We'll find out.
We'll see.
Now, what is our new word? Merchant.
Show merchant.
Our second word is fearsome. Say fearsome.
Fearsome.
Fearsome. Fearsome means very frightening. Let's use our face or body to show fearsome.
Awesome. Those are scary. They look fearsome, don't they?
They are very fearsome.
Good job.
In this story, you will hear the merchant turned around and saw a fearsome creature who was half man, half beast. A sentence might be, the tiger is one of the most fearsome animals in all the jungle. Now, what is our word? Fearsome. And the final word is fortune. Say fortune.
Fortune.
Fortune. Fortune means great wealth or riches. Boys and girls, show me what you think fortune looks like.
Awesome. Great job. Y'all are doing awesome today.
Part of the king's fortune included castles, jewels, and very fine horses. Now, what is our word?
Correct.
Fortune.
Fortune.
All right, let's say the words one more time with their meaning. Merchant, one who buys and sells goods. Fearsome, very frightening. And fortune, great wealth or riches. When we get ready to read our story, I want you to be sure to listen for those new vocabulary words. The title of this fairy tale is Beauty and the Beast, and you will hear the first half of the story today. The story was first written in a book by a woman from France named Madame Villeneuve. Listen carefully to see if the merchant will be able to get his daughters the gifts they really wanted. And listen carefully for our new vocabulary words. Are you ready for the story? We sure are. Boys and girls, Beauty and the Beast, Part 1.
Once upon a time, in a faraway country, there lived a merchant with his 3 daughters. The merchant was very rich. Indeed, he had more money than he needed, until a lot of hard things had happened. First, the merchant lost 2 of the biggest ships full of cargo, goods he was going to sell, in a storm at sea. Then he was forced to give up his lavish, very expensive and fancy home in the city because he could no longer afford to pay for it. The merchant lost his fortune and was left with nothing. He told his daughters that they would have to move to a little cottage in the woods, far from town, and work hard and live simple. The 2 older daughters complained bitterly, for they had grown accustomed to the life of luxury. The older daughters had a hard time living their new life in the cottage. But the youngest daughter, who was called Beauty, always tried to make the best of things. Several months later, The merchant heard that one of his ships, which he thought had been lost at sea, had in fact landed in a cargo of valuable goods to sell. As the merchant prepared to make the long trip to the city to claim and get back his goods, he asked his daughters what he might bring them when he returned. The eldest daughter asked for a fancy gown. The second daughter asked for a diamond necklace. Beauty had plenty of things she wished for, but none that her father's money could buy. Beauty replied to be polite, "Please bring me a rose, for I have not seen one since we came here, and I love them so much." When the merchant finally reached his ship, he found that most of his goods had been stolen. He sold what remained and made just enough money to buy a dress for his eldest daughter and a necklace for his second daughter. Then he set off for home. On his way home, snow began to fall. It covered the road and made it hard to see. The wind blew so hard, it almost knocked the merchant off his horse. He was worried that he might get lost in the blizzard, which is a very big snowstorm. The merchant decided that he should stop at the next house he came to and wait there until the storm passed. Eventually, he came upon a large palace with lights blazing. He knocked, but no one answered. He found that the door was unlocked. So he opened it and peered in. "Hello," he called out, but there was no answer. He stepped into the foyer or front hall and brushed the snow off his coat. Curious yet hesitant, the merchant slowly made his way into a large dining hall. To his surprise, a fire was burning in the fireplace, and a little table had been set with a sumptuous meal, just right for one person. "Hello," he called again. "Is anybody here?" Again, there was no answer. The merchant inspected the food. "Is someone eating this food?" he asked. "Would you mind if I had a few bites? I have been riding in a bitter snowstorm and," he continued. When there was no reply, the merchant decided that he would have a few bites of food and then look for his gracious host. After he had eaten, he set off to find the owner of the house to thank him. He wandered through the rooms on the ground floor, but neither master nor servant appeared. At last, he stepped outside into a beautiful garden.
Boys and girls, let's stop for just a moment and answer some questions about the parts of the story that we've read so far. I want you to think about your answer and answer in a complete sentence and try to include the question in your response. Which characters have we met so far in the story?
I see a bunch of hands going up.
That's right. Good.
I heard that they said they had met the merchant and his 3 daughters.
The merchant and his 3 daughters. So far, nobody with magical powers, though.
Not yet.
Which character has not appeared in the story yet?
Well, it said the title was Beauty and the Beast, but we haven't seen a beast or read about a beast in the story yet, have we?
No, we have not.
Have we, boys and girls?
Why did the merchant go inside the palace? Do you remember? Great job. You're right.
They're correct. He went in because it was a horrible blizzard or snowstorm outside.
What do you think is going to happen next? Do you think the father will go into the garden? Do you think he might meet the beast? Let's keep reading and find out the answers to these questions. I'm glad you've made your predictions. Now on with the story.
The merchant was astonished and amazed to discover that the garden was in full bloom, even though it was in the middle of winter, and most of the countryside was covered in a thick blanket of snow. In the garden, birds chirped, flowers bloomed, the air was sweet and balmy, warm and calm. The man explored the garden until he came upon a row of beautiful rose bushes. He remembered that Beauty had asked him to bring her a rose. He reached out to pluck a rose, but just as the stem broke, he heard a loud roar behind him. "Who told you that you might gather roses in my garden?" said a low, gruff voice. The startled merchant turned around and saw a fearsome creature who was half man and half beast. "What?" said the beast. "Is it not enough that I have given you dinner and a place to wait out the storm? You must also steal my roses?" "Please forgive me," said the merchant, falling to his knees. "I tried to find you to thank you for the meal. I will pay you for it if you like. As for the rose, I only wanted it for my youngest daughter, Beauty. Her only wish when I left her was that I return with a rose for her. Your gardens are so magnificent, I did not think you would miss a single rose." "You are very ready with excuses and flattery and kind words," Beast said, "but that will not save you from the punishment you deserve." "Oh, forgive me," said the merchant, "if not for my own sake, then for the sake of my daughters. If I do not return home, there will be no one to support and take care of them." There was a long pause. Then the beast spoke again. "I will forgive you," he said, "on one condition. You must send one of your daughters to live with me. Go and see if any of them is brave enough and loves you enough to save you from a life in my castle. If one of them will come, you may send her in your place. Otherwise, you must come yourself and face your punishment." When the storm was over, the merchant returned home. He gave his daughters their present: a gown for the eldest, a diamond necklace for the second, and a rose for Beauty. The older sisters were delighted, but Beauty could sense that something was wrong. "Father," she said, "why do you sigh so deeply when you gave me that beautiful rose?" "In a few days I will tell you," said the merchant, "but for now, let's just enjoy being together." The end.
Wasn't that a great story?
That was a great story.
I'm so excited to find out what happens in part 2. Now, let's see what you remember about the fairy tale. I want you to answer in a complete sentence and use the question in your response. The fairy tale is a special kind of story. How do we know that this story is a fairy tale?
Boys and girls, what do you think? Awesome. I heard a lot say that it begins with once upon a time, many years ago.
Many years ago. And usually there's a magical creature or a power that one of the characters has. Think back to the beginning of the story. What happened to the merchant's fortune?
Great job. Let me share an answer I heard. He lost his fortune. His ships were taken. They were stolen. So he lost everything he had.
And so they went from living
lavishly to a tiny cottage out of town.
That's right. What was unusual about the Beast's palace?
Great job, boys and girls. That was a hard question.
It
I
is
had
a
to think for
hard
just a second, and I know they did. The garden was unusual. Even though there was a blizzard outside, the garden was as if it was in the middle of spring. It was untouched by the weather.
Why is the Beast described as fearsome or frightening.
Great job, boys and girls. Look at their expression. I see that he's half man and half beast. Great job describing that.
What other words might you use to describe the beast?
Great. I heard scary. What else do you hear?
I heard sad, but I also heard you say that he was generous and kind
Yes,
to the merchant.
that is correct. Great job.
Now, we are going to do an activity called Think, Pair, Share. You can find a partner for this activity at your house, your mom or dad, your grandmother, a brother, a sister, or even a neighborhood friend. I'm going to ask you a question, and then you will take a moment to think about the question and then discuss it with your partner. Ready? At the end of the story, the beast tells the merchant to return for his punishment. Do you think that the merchant would return? Would you? Boys and girls, do you think he will send one of his daughters in his place? Which one do you think he will send?
Let's see. Let's continue to read.
We'll find out in the next part of the story, in part 2. Now let's do a little word work. The merchant lost his fortune and was left with nothing. Say the word fortune with me.
Fortune.
The word fortune means to have great wealth or good luck. These are some sentences that you might use the word fortune in. The merchant had good fortune when his ship was found. The queen's fortune included a beautiful castle and jewels. Have you ever had good fortune? Remember, it can mean great wealth or good luck. So I want you to think of a time when you've had good luck before. Try to use the word fortune when you tell about it. I see you. I can hear you. Try to start the sentence like this. I had good fortune when, and complete the sentence.
I heard someone say when I win the lottery.
Wow.
Awesome. Great
that
job.
That would be good. What's the word we've been talking about?
Fortune.
Excellent. The prefix miss, M-I-S, often makes a word have the opposite meaning. What do you think misfortune means? Remember, fortune means good luck, so the opposite of good luck is bad luck. Misfortune is the opposite or the antonym of the word fortune. I'm going to read an example. If I name an example of the good fortune, say, thumbs up, this is good fortune. If I name an example of misfortune or bad luck, thumbs down. Ready? Here we go. Miss Melissa is going to be an example for you, so check your answers. The merchant lost his ship at sea.
I see thumbs going up. Great job. This is, think about it again. He lost his ship. What is it? Correct. This is misfortune.
The merchant had a happy and healthy family.
Awesome. Great job.
The merchant could not pay for his lavish house anymore.
This is misfortune.
Let's quickly refer back to our KWL chart. Boys and girls, we talked about what we've already know and what we wanted to know. This is what we've learned.
We've learned that there really is a lesson to be learned in a fairy tale. And we also learned that the characters sometimes have magical powers. Thank you for joining us today. All rights and credits from this lesson belong to Core Knowledge Language Arts. We would like to thank them for publicly sharing these materials.
We'll see you for part 2 of Beauty and the Beast.